Welcome to the Why Not podcast with me, Chrissy Hawkins. In a world where everybody asks you why, I'm here to ask why not. So sit back and relax or walk and listen and join me on this journey as we try to answer this never-ending question: what makes people say, why not? Hey guys, welcome back to Why Not. So today I have a guest who is a dietitian and she works with horse riders. So we talk a lot about nutrition for horse riding here, but we also talk a little bit about relationship with food. So it's not a horse riding themed episode. I do want to say as well, I did have a bit of an issue with the internet, so there might be a few parts that are a bit jumpy. We lost connection twice. Andrea, who was my guest, is all the way in Australia, so I'm glad we still managed to get a good interview done, and the internet didn't completely bomb out before I could finish off the interview. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I found this really interesting, and Andrea's views and stuff like that and working with riders sounds so cool. Okay, hi guys, welcome back to Why Not. So I have a guest for you today. Now this might be a bit more for the equestrian audience, but I think everyone can always learn. So you don't necessarily have to be a horse rider if you're into this. But I have Andrea from Riding Nutrition. She is a dietitian and she kind of specializes in nutrition for equestrians. So you've probably heard me giving out about horse riders not eating properly. Well, this is what she does. So welcome to the podcast, Andrea. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Chrissy. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
I'm so excited to talk to you as well, because I was just saying before we came on, I don't think there's anyone in Ireland, or there might be in the UK, doing anything like this. So for anyone who couldn't tell the accent, Andrea's over in Australia. So we had some good planning to get here with the time zones.
Yeah, it's always fun trying to work out time zones in our global world.
Oh yeah, I seriously was still convinced I had it wrong when I was about to log on. I was like, is this the right time? Do you want to tell everyone a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so sorry, I am, as you said, Andrea. I'm based in Australia, in Queensland, so one of the really nice, sunny, warm parts of Australia. I have been riding since I was about 9 years old, and I won't say how old I am now, but I've been riding for a while. And I guess when it kind of came time to make decisions about careers, my parents very strongly steered me away from kind of moving into any kind of professional riding. And I kind of fell into becoming a dietitian, which I think was really fortunate because I have found a career now that I absolutely love. But yeah, I went through uni, which is a 4-year degree for us. And I've been working as a dietitian for 10 years. And I guess a couple of years ago, I finally got up the courage to go, okay, I really want to work with riders around their nutrition. I could kind of see the need for it. And decided just to give it a go.
Deadly, that's brilliant. What drew you to working with riders?
I think just seeing having learned a little bit about sports nutrition in my uni degree, I was like, oh, I can see things like hydration would be really beneficial, because we know that the impact that has on cognition if you're dehydrated. And I just think that so much of what we do as riders relates to us being able to perform well cognitively. And so I could kind of see these links there. And obviously I'm a rider myself. I love riding. So it was something that I just had always kind of had this interest in pursuing. Yeah. It just kind of took a while for me to develop the confidence to go, okay, no, I'm going to give this a good go.
I was about the same when I tried to start training for horse riders. I know they need this, but they don't know they need this.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. I find that kind of, there's a missing link, I think, with riders not really considering themselves as athletes, which is crazy, right? Yeah. It is a sport. It's an Olympic sport. And we all will say till we're blue in the face that we don't just sit there, and yet we're not kind of considering ourselves and treating ourselves like athletes.
Yeah, that's so true. I actually love that the way you said that. Because it is like there's nothing more irritating than when someone says, "Oh, you just sit there." Yeah, we're like, "Oh yeah, I don't do it. I do stuff, but like it's all about the horse." It is with riders, though, isn't it? It's like your horse looks at you wrong, and it's like, does he need the vet? Does he need the physio? And like he'd be walking along with like one leg hanging off, and you'd be like, "It's fine, I'll just walk it off."
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose the way I try and reframe that a bit is your horse can't possibly be at their best if you're not at your best. Like, if we are at least 50% of that partnership, we're responsible for making all of the decisions. And I'm definitely not saying that we should take our horses' needs any less seriously, but I think we need to start to elevate our own to at least be on the same level so that we can, if for no other reason, so that we can be there to be our best for our horses.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said earlier as well about cognition and, you know, dehydration, it's a really good point. And I think it's another thing we take for granted, that how dangerous what we do is.
100%.
So like a lack of concentration for 2 seconds, or lapse in concentration, can result in so many fun different things.
Yeah, and I think that was something that I only started to think about last year, is like these links between nutrition, hydration, and cognition, reaction times, all of that sort of stuff. And it's actually not just about performance. You're so right. It's about safety. Like, we've all been in that situation where you're either, you know, walking a horse along, or you're sitting on your horse walking along on a loose rein. And 1 second they're calm and just walking along so nicely. And the next second they're, you know, if you're leading them along, you're like, oh my God, when did my horse turn into a kite? And in those situations, we need to be able to react quickly to keep ourselves, our horse, and other people around us safe.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's interesting as well. Like, you know, when horses react like that as well, I think, I don't know about you, but sometimes a horse does that, my first reaction is, "What are you doing, you idiot?" Like, we should be probably a little bit more like, okay, I should be careful here. Don't want anything to happen.
Yeah. It's like, I think in some ways you kind of need to have that casual attitude about it, because reacting with tension often just kind of feeds the situation, but we do need to have some kind of reaction.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we need to be a little bit more, I suppose, an alert in the way we act. Like, you can't be calm like that, but also need to be like, right, where am I? Like, even subconsciously going, am I positioned okay here if he comes down, or, you know, if he reefs me now with my arm going with him.
Yeah.
Which they often do. It's just give up and go.
Yeah. Or I've definitely had at least one time that I can think of where I was out. We have a lot of sugarcane paddocks, or we used to have a lot of sugarcane paddocks in Queensland that have kind of headlands along them, so you could ride along the headlands. And this one time I was riding my horse along just on a loose rein, like we'd finished kind of a, you know, going for a canter or whatever, and I was cooling him down. And 1 second he was walking along, and the next second I was on the ground. I was like, how did that happen?
It's always like that, isn't it? Like, you just out and you're like, wait, this wasn't what I was planning.
Absolutely.
So when you work with riders, what kind of things would you like, what do you do, I suppose, in a sense, kind of how do you kind of, what best way of saying it is, what type of people come to you? Like, what brings them into you initially?
I am finding that there are two kind of types of people that are riders that I work with. So there's this group that are kind of looking for those performance improvements and really want to kind of learn about sports nutrition. So how to fuel their sessions, how to recover better, how to stay hydrated. And then there is kind of this other group of people who might have a bit of a challenging relationship with food, where, say, they might find that they often feel like they're overeating or they're out of control around food. And that is something that I do a lot of work with as well, is that kind of we call it making peace with food, so that you can kind of eat the things you want, enjoy them, eat things that are going to make you feel good, but not have that guilt around it either.
Yeah. I feel like that's actually becoming a really big thing, like the moving away from food guilt, relationship with food work. Do you see like most of your clients come in through that, or?
At the moment, I would say yeah. And I suppose so I still work in another job in the kind of public health service, and so yeah, I do a lot of that other type of work as well with just kind of improving the relationship with food, because we're kind of in this culture that teaches us that food is bad and that there are certain types of foods that we shouldn't have just because they're high in sugar or high in fat. And that's absolutely not true. We can be healthy, we can perform well and eat a wide variety of different foods.
Yeah, I see that a lot in the gym as well. Like people almost like apologizing and saying, "Oh, it was really bad," and I'm like, "Why? Why was it bad?" Like, because I try to like, I'm not obviously trained that, but I kind of try to make them think about it. Sometimes when they say it, I'm like, "But why is it bad? Like, is it?"
100%. And I love that you do that, because I think that the language that we use around food, and I'm sure you would see this with exercise as well, that language has such a big impact on the way that we think about those things and the way that we feel about them. And so one of my favorite sayings is, the only foods that are bad are foods that you like if you killed someone to get them, or if they're actually off, if they're undercooked, or if you're allergic to them.
Yeah,
those are the only bad foods.
Yeah, that's fair. Also, I get people complaining about exercises they don't like, but I just tell them, like, you don't have to like it. The riders who are coming to you, are they kind of like, would they be professional level, or would they be even just amateur levels who really want to improve, say they're competing and stuff like that?
Yeah, most of the riders I have at the moment are amateurs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think there's like, I can kind of see the needs in both groups of riders for taking a bit more consideration around nutrition and also just improving that relationship with food. But at the moment, most of my riders are amateurs.
And are there any specific disciplines, or do they kind of range across all of them?
At the moment, mostly dressage and endurance.
Yeah.
Again, there wouldn't be any discipline that I would say, no, you don't need to worry about nutrition.
Oh no, absolutely, I agree. Interest, like I was thinking there, like endurance, like how that will be so important. Even thinking, I bet you they have a full on nutrition schedule for the horse that's competing in the endurance.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes in their big events, they're on their horse for over 12 hours.
That sounds insane.
I don't know how they do it, but yeah, it's cool, and that's where we can start to do some really cool things with nutrition in terms of helping them to stay fueled throughout that and hydrated throughout that ride.
Yeah, they like, obviously I imagine if they're on for 12 hours, they'd have like packs with them with stuff like food or water they can carry with them, would they, or are they?
Definitely. And they do also have, so it gets broken down into legs, and I'm not an expert on endurance by any stretch of the imagination, but it gets broken down into legs, and so they'll have regular stops where they get off the horse to have them vetted to make sure that they're still safe to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a bit of a break so that the horse can have a drink and have something to eat.
Yeah, that's one sport actually I don't know. The endurance I wouldn't know a lot of, because it's not really I think there's the odd endurance rider here, but it's very, very like, it wouldn't be big here. But I always like also like interested in hearing about it.
Yeah, I actually would love to give it a go one day.
Yeah, it would be really cool. I think I may not want to ever ride again after, but
Oh, exactly. And I definitely wouldn't do so they're 160 Ks, those big rides, like they're national championships. But maybe like a smaller 20K ride, I would be keen to give that a go.
Yeah, that'll be okay. That's all right. That sounds doable. And then the dressage riders, what kind of things do they need to work on a bit more? Would you find?
So it kind of depends again on how many horses people are riding, how long they're riding for. Because I think there's kind of this perception that as riders, we don't really need that much energy. But if you're like, even if you're just doing one ride on one horse, like that's actually quite energy demanding, especially when you start to consider all of the other stuff that we do around that. So, you know, catching our horse, mucking out stables, just all of the stuff that's involved in riding takes a lot of energy. And so kind of considering that base nutrition, but then also making sure sessions are being fueled well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess in those shorter rides, hydration, like it's still something we want to consider. But if we're just doing one ride on one horse, then it's, you know, we can just drink to thirst. But when you have riders that are riding multiple horses, or say they're going out to a competition and having a few rides in a day, then hydration, we need to start to have a bit more of a plan around that.
Yeah, no, that's so important. And really we're thinking about, because I know obviously where you are, it can be quite warm as well. So it's really important there. But even I'm thinking here, like people in Ireland are terrible at drinking water as it is. But if they're at a competition, I know even years ago, I'd been at competitions and I have like one bottle of water with me for the day or something. When even if you are only riding one horse, you have to get there, you have to tack up, and it's all these things you don't think about because you're too busy panicking probably about what you're going to do next.
Yeah, remembering your test or just being stressed and anxious. But yeah, definitely taking lots of water and snacks.
Yes.
Because I don't know what the show food is like over in Ireland, but here in Australia it tends to be like burgers and chips. And again, I have no problem with those types of foods, but if you kind of think about the things that sit well in your stomach before exercise, often those high fat foods aren't actually going to sit well, especially if you're going in to do, say, a dressage test where you're going to have to do some sit trot. Like, you maybe want something a little bit lighter, a bit more easily and quickly digested.
Yeah, no, that makes loads of sense. And you're right. Yeah, we have like a burger van and maybe a coffee van generally at our competitions, and that's about it. Or any ones I've been to, I haven't been to them for a while, but I don't think it's changed, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I would have been when I did like low level competing, like I would have been more kind of doing a bit of show jumping and eventing as well. And even if you're not doing a dressage test, you're just have a burger like sitting in your stomach because you're trying to go cross country, like.
Exactly. And look, everyone's really different in terms of what they can tolerate before exercise. And this is probably something that you would see even working with people in the gym. Like, I've got a friend who, if she has anything more than like a juice before she goes and exercises, she will 10 times out of 10 vomit. Yeah. Whereas I can eat much more substantial meals and be fine. I've just seem to have a digestive system of steel. So it, you know, if those things sit okay and don't make you feel uncomfortable, great. Mm-hmm. But if they are causing you problems, then that's something that can be improved.
Yeah.
Or adjusted to make you feel more comfortable.
Do you ever get any like pushback off them when you're trying to suggest, like, you know, to bring more different things, or they like, but I get my burger at the show, or I like to do this? And
no, I think the riders that I work with are really open to trying different things.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah,
I find it sometimes hard to, like, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but in Ireland I feel like the whole sport is a little bit behind on all things like this. Like, now, say our top level riders probably have trainers and stuff like that, but like the amateurs will be like finish work straight up to the yard, you know, could be home at 10 o'clock and then maybe having their dinner. And even explaining different things to them, they're kind of like, it's just not like even things, silly things like tech, like a lot of them don't have websites, places and stuff like that. It's getting better now, but it's all that kind of thing. It seems to be a little bit behind everything else.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it?
I think a lot of them are still kind of like ran like farms, not in a bad way, but like that's why it might be a little bit like they might be a little bit behind on certain things.
Yeah, and I think we don't have heaps of we call it adjustment over here, but lots of people will own their own properties. I suppose it's probably like a 50-50 split. Lots of people will own their own properties because obviously we've got probably a bit more land available over here. But then there are definitely people who will keep their horse at someone else's place. Yeah, and I would say they don't tend to be necessarily like high-tech setups. You're usually pretty happy if there's a stable, a safe paddock, and a nice arena.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of, most people have their horse at home. It's kind of like that. But yeah, I'd say we'd have more. Well, I'm in Dublin, so where I am, I'd say there'd be more people having their horse on like livery, so they're keeping the horse, paying a yard there. Or whereas if you were down the country, you'd have a lot more people who'd probably have a stable at the back and a field with a couple of fences in it, you know.
Yeah.
But it's cool. I think I'd love to have one of those setups, even just like a little field at the back, and then
That's the dream.
yeah. How do they find drinking more water?
I think that's an interesting one. Like, it's obviously a bit easier in Australia when we have the heat. Like, even our winter really, especially in Queensland, doesn't get that cold. Like, if it gets under kind of 10 degrees, that would be considered really cold, especially for me, because I used to live in North Queensland. Where it does not get cold at all. So I suppose having that heat kind of helps you to drink a little bit more. But then I think kind of the culture around our sport, like, I know for myself, when I'm having lessons, I would never stop to have a drink. Which again is okay when it's a shorter session. If you feel thirsty, you should stop and drink. But I think we have this culture in our sport that is like, well, we don't need to do that. And it's like almost kind of this sign of you're dedicated and a tough rider if you don't stop to drink. So I think we actually need to start shifting that stuff and thinking about, okay, well, what does it mean if I'm stopping to have a drink? Like, well, it means I'm meeting my own needs and I'm staying hydrated so that I can ride at my best. And also that safety factor of like, I'm going to be able to concentrate better, react better.
Yeah, that's so true what you said there about like, it's like, you know, you just keep going. It's like you keep going till it's right. Like, you don't break. But if you feel like your horse feels tired, you'll let them have a go.
Exactly. Yeah. Why are we so much kinder to our horses than we are to ourselves?
Yeah, it's just easier to put it on to someone else, isn't it? Like, you know, and ignore yourself. I find it's interesting how you're saying that like, you know, the hard as nails. We similar over here, but they an online magazine that I write for, they called the Grassroots Gazette. Them in conjunction with another guy set up this thing last January called the Hay Campaign, and it was about mental health awareness in the equestrian industry, and it blew up. And you're like, see, we do need these things. You like, you know, it's okay to not be the hard as nails horse riders. You don't have to be, you know.
Yeah, isn't that funny? It's like we can actually be compassionate and kind to ourselves and still be, you know, savvy business owners or be competitive, fierce riders. Like, the two things can exist together.
Yeah, they don't have to be like mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just wild. It's just when you said that, it just reminded me of that, and I just like how fast it spread, and it's solely because it's clearly really needed. Just like the nutrition and training, all these other things, because also, you know yourself, nutrition feeds into your mental well-being as well.
That emerging field, that link between nutrition, our gut health, and our brains or our mental health.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So again, like if you find maybe you're struggling with your riding or something's not going right, like it could be that you're not eating enough. You could be now being harder on yourself because you're not like fueling yourself properly. It's just all these things are interlinked, and if we have to sell it this way, it'll be better for your horse too, because you won't be snappy with them.
Exactly. Like hangry is a very real thing.
Yeah.
When we're hungry, we tend to not be as well emotionally regulated. So you probably are going to react to things differently than when you are eating enough. And one of the things I definitely find with riders is that they don't eat enough.
Mm. And how do you get them to try and like eat more, or is it like about like incorporating snacks or getting them to meal prep, or does it depend on the person kind of thing?
It depends on the person a little bit. Often I find that there's just because again, kind of going back to like the culture that we live in that kind of tells us that eating less is better. I find people just kind of often once you say, hey, you actually need to be eating a little bit more than that. Like, are you feeling hungry in between meals, or are you feeling satisfied when you finish your meal? And they're like, no, I don't feel full from that. And telling them just like, you can eat a bit more, that's okay. That's a good thing. For some people, that's enough. For other people, if they're doing a lot of exercise, that can actually blunt their hunger cues a bit. So it's about recognizing, okay, well, just because you're not hungry in that situation doesn't mean that you don't need that nutrition. So let's plan to have a snack or plan to have a slightly bigger meal.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really depends on the person and exactly what's going on.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. People like, because I find in general as well, like, you know, trying to get people to eat more, even in the gym. Like I say, not even like horse riders, like sometimes I say to people in the gym, it's like, you saw how much I ate, like you wouldn't believe me, you know, that kind of way, because I eat a lot, like and I'm like, if you could eat, you know, you just, it's okay.
Yeah.
How long do you find like it takes them to kind of see the benefits?
I think when people aren't eating enough and we can get more, they usually notice changes in their energy levels pretty quickly. I guess when on that relationship with food piece, that can take a bit longer. And it really depends on the individual person again. Sorry, that's a really vague and boring answer, but so much of this stuff, it really depends on exactly where someone's at and what's going on for them as to hopefully that progress happens.
Yeah, no, I do. I know it is kind of like asking how long's a piece of string when you ask these kind of questions. It's just kind of interesting to see, like, you know, obviously getting processed in when you're working on your nutrition, no matter what way you're coming from, it's not going to happen overnight. It's like you have to learn the habits of like having your food ready and stuff like that, or even having snacks and stuff like that. So do you ever find like you'd be talking to a client and they'd be like, and talking about it, and you almost have to point it out to them?
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think that maybe comes back to a little bit how hard we can be on ourselves, and we don't necessarily notice that progress until it is kind of highlighted. And sometimes just, you know, it's like the same sort of thing as writing, like when you're in the middle of it, you don't actually see how far you've come until you can kind of take a step back and zoom out and be like, oh, this used to be hard, but it's actually really easy now.
Yeah. Do you find horse riders are harder on themselves than, or they kind of be the same as everyday people?
I think people generally are pretty good at being hard on themselves.
Yeah, I don't just think of like, especially with dressage riders, like, you know,
I
you do a competition where you pay people to judge you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like people think, you know, the
Or
events
especially
stuff are the crazy ones. It's the dressage riders.
yeah, just doing this thing where you get judged for how beautifully you can do it.
Yeah. I'm being paid to tell them bad at it.
even I find that though is such an interesting interesting way of looking at it. Like I prefer to think of that judging as being like feedback on how your training's going, rather than like someone coming in and telling you, well, you're doing this wrong and this wrong and this wrong and this could be better and this was okay.
That's a really good way of looking at it. Dressage, I was never very good at it. There's a couple of reasons. I don't really have the patience for it. My horse doesn't have the patience for it. And I'll just learn the test is to do my head in. But like throw me in front of fences, I'll panic the whole way around. But if I just point and kick, it's generally okay.
Yeah, see, I'm pretty much the exact opposite of that. So when I was younger, I used to do a bit of everything. So I'd say over here, probably the Olympic disciplines tend to be the biggest, but then we also have a sport called polo cross, which is similar to polo, except instead of having a mallet, you've got this stick with a net on it. Okay. So it's kind of maybe a bit more like cross on horseback. So I used to sometimes kind of do that when I went to pony club camp, and I tried a little bit of camp drafting and all of that sort of stuff. But I was never brave enough to really get into show jumping or eventing properly. And the horse that I had that I probably jumped the most on also was a bit of a scaredy cat. So he's the only horse that I've ever had this happen on, but we went into the water jump and then he kind of ran out on the way out of the water. So I got a refusal in the second part of the water complex.
That's brilliant.
So we're in the water and then he just, instead of just jumping straight out.
That's so funny. I love that he just went, nope. Like, what would be maybe your top advice for somebody who wants to look into their nutrition a little bit? Like,
I would say, oh, that's such a hard one. I would probably say, really try and move away from thinking of it as being good or bad, and really start to take notice of how different foods are making you feel. So getting into, you know, different foods make you feel fuller for longer, do different foods give you more energy? Do some foods taste amazing and maybe don't kind of fill you up for as long, or do they maybe not sit as well in your stomach? And that's then not to say that, say if something like, you know, a croissant doesn't fill you up, it's not to say that you can't have it, but it's about thinking about, okay, is this a snack or is it a meal, or do you need to add something else in with that if you're going to have it as a meal? Or do you just need to know that if you have that, then you're going to need to have a snack earlier in the day, and maybe a bit more of a substantial snack than you would have if you had something more filling and satisfying for breakfast.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that. It's always good, I think, with nutrition as well, to like look at adding things in as opposed to taking them away.
Yes, I am such a big fan of adding things in rather than taking it away. And, you know, we know that idea of just cutting things out does work for people, because when we make foods off limits, it actually makes them more appealing. It's like if someone says to you, don't think about the elephant in the room, like that's what your mind goes to. You start thinking about the elephant.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same with food. When we have something, we think about it more, and we can usually resist that for a while, but when we do kind of decide to have that thing, we're much more likely to eat a lot more of it than we would have if we just had it in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely right. And does that go, would that for you, would that go for anyone that you were doing nutrition with, or that would be like, would you have anything else different to say to riders? Or
the other thing I would say to riders is that eating enough is going to help you to ride better, or ride at your best. And I get that it's hard to do things like cook a meal when you are getting home really late. But cooking a meal that's satisfying and has the things that your body needs in it doesn't have to take hours and hours. There are lots of different options that are really quick and simple to throw together. Like, I don't know if baked beans are a thing in Ireland.
oh, they are, yeah.
So something as simple as baked beans on toast with cheese, like that's actually a great meal, and it doesn't take ages. Like you can just zap the beans in the microwave, chuck the toast in the toaster, and you can have a meal really quickly.
Yeah, do you know what? I actually love beans on toast, but I bet you, saying about not like labeling things good and bad, like people will probably look at that and go, that's not a good meal, not realizing the actual nutritional content of it.
Yeah. And so even sometimes I feel like my role is just kind of assuring people that those sorts of things are nutritious and going to be as filling as a steak and veg pasta, but if it's the option between or nothing or that and just eating chocolate for dinner, then that's a really great option.
Yeah.
And again, not to say that eating chocolate for dinner is a bad thing, but it's probably not going to be the make you feel energetic and help your recovery. Make the best option every day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But if it's your birthday, it'll be great, isn't it? Okay, so I had just have one other question to ask you, and it's kind of like off topic from what we were talking about. And this is something I like to ask all my guests. And what is the best advice that you've ever been given? This can be anything. It doesn't have to be nutrition, horse. It can be anything.
I wasn't given this advice directly. I think I heard it on a podcast or something, and it just really resonated with me. And so for anyone who has feelings of imposter syndrome or like they're not good enough, the advice is believe in the people who believe in you.
That is really cool. I like that.
Yeah, that one I was like, oh wow, that kind of, yeah.
Yeah, that one, like, I had to pause for a minute there and I was like, oh my God, that is so good. Yes, I'm going to write that on my whiteboard.
Yeah, do it across your forehead.
Yeah, something you need, yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to ask you today. Thanks for joining us. But also before you go, can you tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, so on Instagram, my handle is rider.nutrition. I also have a website, which is andreaparkerdietitian.com, and you'll be able to navigate to the section that's for equestrians. Those are probably the two best places to find me. And I've got some freebies, like a snack guide for equestrians, if that is something that people are wanting on my website.
Deadly, that is brilliant. And as ever, guys, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok. It's at @stronginthesaddle_ for Instagram. And there's no underscore for TikTok. And then my website is www.chrissyhawkins.com. So yeah, I just want to say thanks again for joining us and helping me battle through the internet problems.
No, it's been awesome talking to you, Chrissy.
I really do appreciate everybody who listens to this podcast. So if you please could help me with the algorithm and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And even, if you want to reach out and suggest topics for me, I'd be delighted to hear from you. Drop me a DM on Instagram or TikTok, and thanks again for listening.